Imagine creating beautiful boxes just like these. Well, you can, and it's much easier than you think. Gifkins Dovetail manufactures the easiest jig on the market. It's the only Australian-made dovetail jig. It's so simple to use and cuts precise joints every time. There's no measuring, no fiddling, and no fuss. We even offer box making courses to suit all levels. And of course, every purchase comes with our after-sales service. So explore our website to see the Gifkins jig and so much more.
Good morning, folks. Welcome to the last show of the year. There hasn't been that many, but hey, we got through a fair few. But we're going to have a little break, and we're going to be back in January, about the 17th, according to Pammy. So that's about a 3-week break. And I think in the meantime, I have to do some renovations. Oh, yes. But anyway, that's by the by. So what we're going to do, what we did last week, actually, where I'm at with last week's work, was we cut ourselves a test joint, which I have here, for the uneven-sided box. This one. So what we're going to do today is we're going to get everything ready in the frame of the box. We're going to build the box, and I'll show you where to go with it after we've got it built and take it to the next step. And then when we come back in January, I'm going to spend a little bit of time. We'll do a number of different lids for it. This one here is just a flat panel. So if we just make that just that simple one, it'll get you started with lids. But we'll do that when we come back. Now, last week on the jig, I cut a test joint. Now, our test joint, when I put it together, it looked really nice. But we've had a lot of weather lately, and when I tested it, it's actually got a bit of movement in it. Okay, so that's a little bit too loose for my liking. I like the joints so that they're just snug, just fit together, but when they've got a little bit of movement like that, I then have a little bit of a play with the jig and trying to readjust the jig. So this is what I did. Just pull that apart. Here's my jig. So what I did is I took out one of the shims. That's it there. Incidentally, that's a really good thing to do with the shims. You can use them for information sheets. So I took the sheet out and I recut a test joint, and it worked exactly right. Now, the other thing that I did last week, during the week I should say, was I used the timber that I had cut up for the box and built the frame of the box. And if you can see, it's quite a big box. It's way too big to be playing with on the bench here to show you the techniques involved in getting the box done. So what I also did was I cut myself some new material, a little bit thinner, so that I end up with a box that big. Okay, so if you can see the difference between the two, there is a significant difference between the two boxes. So I'm going to build this one here, and then in the gluing time that we have, I'm going to try and adjust some of the bits and pieces around the box and make it parallel to each other, and that's what we'll go to when we get there. But the first thing is we have to cut the box frame. So what I did was I changed my plan a little bit, and this is the beauty of actually doing it here. Instead of being 89, I think it was 98 millimetres and 86 millimetres on that side. I've just changed my plan so I've got something to read during the thing. I can go back to that every time just to check and so I cut my timber at that size. Okay, so there's my two pieces, my two sets of timber. So just by rearranging, have a little practice and working out a few different details during the process of actually building the box, you can change things on the next time round. So that's basically what I've done. Now, what I want to do is I want to show you how to set up. If I was setting up, let's shift this out of the way. If I was setting up, remember when we did our desktop box, I set the material up in the middle of the jig, like so. I brought up a stop. I put my spacers in, brought up my other stop, cut my joints, and then turned the jig around to cut my pins on the other side, and the piece of material fitted in perfectly. That does not apply with an uneven sided box. So if I set the jig up like so, and then took my thinner piece of material, which is the front of the back, I don't have a datum point on the jig to actually get that to sit in the right place so that I get my joints perfectly fitted. I don't have that datum point, so I have to create them on each end of the jig. So this is how we go about it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the dovetails in the long piece of timber, and I'll put the pins in the short piece. So the first thing I'll do, spread the two stops out, move them up to the end of the jig like so, and then my piece of chalk, which I'll just get out of the cupboard here, and face side mark, face side mark, face side mark, and face side mark. So I've got my face side marks on all of my pieces of timber. Thing is, there is another mark we need to put on there. We need to have reference points. So if you look at that, you'll see that the difference between the two pieces of timber is 10 millimeters. What I don't want is I don't want a joint on the top of that piece. So just to keep me in the loop, just so that I'm reminded that there's something that has to happen or not happen on that point, I put a cross on there as well. So that gives me my two top corners, and you can see that the bottom of the face side mark is pointing at the bottom of the box and the top of the box, of course, so it's giving me all of those references. Excuse me. So we've got outside of the box, bottom of the box, top of the box, and these two corners need some sort of adjustment. Okay, so that's how we're going to set it up. Now, I'm going to cut dovetails in my short piece. So when we set it up, this is what we do. We set up evenly across the pins on the dovetail side, because that's where we're going to cut our dovetails first. Now, if you find that a little difficult, like I said to you earlier, turn the jig around and line your timber up. You can see that. You can see how I've lined it up evenly on the pins. It's a lot easier to see. We then slide the stop into place, and once you put these stops in place, they stay there. Take the other one up the other end, line that up nicely, bring that stop up. So what's going to happen is I'm going to turn the jig around, set my piece of timber in there, and I'm going to cut dovetail there, 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 and there. We'll then turn the piece of timber up to the other end of the jig, and we will cut there, 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 and there. So you must move from one end of the jig to the other. You can't rotate it like this, it just won't work. You must move from one end to the other. Now, by doing, we'll go back to our front, by doing putting the timber on this end here, what we do is we cut the joints, we turn the machine off, we swap our piece of timber up to the other end, we turn the machine back on, then we turn it off again, and we pick up our other piece and we do exactly the same thing. So that means turning the machine on and off 4 times. So to avoid that, and so that you get the job done a tiny little bit quicker, this is where we go. Do the whole lot at once. So if I put that on like so, lock one in place, the important thing to remember with this one, is make sure that your face side mark is pointing out. You can't actually see it on this one, but if I turn to the other camera, maybe you can. You can see my face side mark. Make sure you're sitting hard down on top of the stop, on top of the template, and hard up against the stop. Okay, so very important that you do that. When you pick your other piece up, do exactly the same thing and lock it into place at the other end. Now, if I do that, what I'm then doing is I can cut all of these, cut all of those, and then all I have to do is rotate them over and do exactly the same thing. So I'm turning the machine on once, turning it off once, job done. Does that sound a bit tricky? Okay, we'll show you how to go about it. So our first step, set up the router. And again, very important point here, a little bit of oil. Make sure you give your router bits a bit of a scrub. Only takes a few minutes. I did it before the show. Lock in my dovetails, dovetail bit. Give it a check. Adjust my height. Now remember, always use the opposing piece of material. That's the bit that's going to go into there. Okay? So, my opposing piece of material. I often make my side panels a little thicker than my front and back panel. Gives me a little bit of room to play with occasionally. So our 1/2 mil. Now remember, last week I cut the test joint. I did exactly the same thing. I cut my test joint, and as I said, it got a little bit wet during the week, and what happened was the backing board expanded. It moved out away from the block a bit, and it made the joints a little bit too loose. So I've taken a shim away. Hopefully this will fit perfectly. Well, I know it will because I've already built this box. All right, time to cut. So, ears down, folks. So what I've done there, and I'm just going to press this point a little again, I'm pushing the jig away from myself. I have the jig between me and the router bit. Anything that might want to fly off the timber, or if I break a bearing or anything like that happens, it's going to push it away from you. If you turn around and you have it pointing this way, you're going to eventually hurt yourself. And I wouldn't like to be responsible for that. So my advice to you is hands on the bench and push it away. You're not moving very far. You can look over the top. If you can't see over the top, you can always turn it to the side here and have a look, but you're still pushing away from yourself. Now, a little bit of tear out on the edge of that, hasn't damaged anything. As you can see, I now have beautiful dovetail joints on there. Put that one there. And if I rotate this way, making sure my face side mark is out and the bottom of the box is pointing at the stop. Was there a question there, Pammy?
Brian was just saying, so you don't need to start at the red stop this time, but in fact you have, and you're using both of them facing out.
Yes. Yeah. So we're actually, Brian, the red stop business works with even-sided boxes. So it's always, you know, like this is a whole new technique. We're using both stops, and the base of, or the bottom of the box is pointing at both stops at the same time. If you have a look, you can see on the, I'll just put that camera up a tiny little bit so you can see. You can see my face side mark here and my face side mark on this side, and the bottom of the box is here. So they're both at the stops. Okay, so that's quite important. Okay, so, yep, terrific. Okay, going to cut the second lot. Ears down, folks. So, as you can see, that didn't take very long at all. It very, very quick when you consider the amount of dovetails that we've cut. You can see that I've got 6 dovetails, and it took a very short period of time. If I wasn't talking, you would find that I'd be done already. Okay, so now to do my pins, same technique. Don't move anything on the jig. Leave the jig as it is. Take my 2 panels, sit them up exactly the same way I set up the front and back panel. Face side mark out, the bottom of the face side mark against the stop. And there we have it. Change my bit.
This actually looks quite easy, the way you've explained it with the marks.
It is easy. There's somebody asking that. Okay, same process when it comes to adjusting the height. Make sure your bench is clean. My 1/2 millimetre. Lock that in. Now this technique is the same technique that I used with the special jewellery box, or with the desktop box. And when we're cutting the pins, I cut across the face first, took out a tiny little bit, okay, just a millimetre or two, so that I didn't get tear out because of the way the router bit runs through the material. You don't want to tear out in the front of the joint. And that's because we have a wider space between here and here. Okay, so between each of this, we have a wider space than we do on the other side. Okay, that's just a little bit of revision for those people who saw it earlier. So I'll just clear off my desk here a bit. And I'm ready. Now, ears on, folks. Okay, so I'm just going to test one of these. Always a good idea to make sure the test right. Oh, look at that. It's absolutely perfect. So what we have now, because I took that shim out, I have a fitting that has no wobble in it whatsoever. And it just fits nice and neat. And you saw how well that went together. It just popped straight into place. Now, same technique as before. Rotate up to the other end, put the piece of timber in place and lock it in. So now I have my other pieces. You'll notice where the cross is on the top there, I haven't cut the extra piece of joint. That was my reminder to say don't do anything there, okay? Because it's going to sit above the front pieces. So, ears on. Okay, how's that? We now have all the pins, no problem. When you look at the end of it, nicely done, nice and neat, no tear out on the front, no tear out on the back. So I can get rid of the jig because we don't need that anymore. Get rid of those two clamps because I don't need those anymore. I'll just take this router bit out of here because we don't need it anymore. Always a good idea to set yourself up for the next task. So my next task is going to be cut the trench for the base. Now, most of the stuff that we're going to do from here on is basically revision from the first box. I'll just get that out of the way for a start off, and we'll assemble the box. So here's my frame. As you can see, there's the bottom. This one goes into here. And it just goes in so nice. When you've got your jig set up properly, it's such a pleasure to do this stuff. And when you see it in its finished form, like that, no effort whatsoever to put that box frame together. And when you look at the joints, you can see they are absolutely spot on perfect. And that's what you're trying to achieve. That's what you want. Just make sure that everything is nice and neat, and it gives you a little bit of sense of pride because you succeeded in at something. Okay. Now, while it's in that position there, we're going to cut a trench around the bottom for the base. Now, I have a piece of base material here. It's another piece of rose mahogany. Again, I reiterate, I don't use manufactured timbers in the bottom of my boxes. I try to make sure that they're all, you know, pretty nice pieces of timber and they match up to something else in the box. Okay, so now, just grab my scissors. So safety. During this session, I'm going to be talking about a fair bit of safety because some of the techniques that we use have an element of danger in them, as with working with any router or any tool. So my first task is tape this up. Even though my joints fit perfectly together, I really like to make sure that things are perfectly safe. Now, what I have here is fibre reinforced tape, and now I have a wrap round. That box is not going to fall apart. Even though your joints are really nice, sometimes you'll find that they shift during the process of cutting the trench. It could be dangerous to you. You could have it collapse in on the route a bit. That doesn't sound like it could be a good thing, but so tape it up. Give it something to some support. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set I'll just bring this back up again. The router bit that I'm using there, I'm just going to check that to make sure it's tight. The router bit that I'm using here is our TGRC rebate cutter. It cuts a 4mm trench. Now remember, this is all revision. It cuts a 4mm trench, 5mm deep. 5mm is adequate to support my piece of base material. So what I'm going to do is change over the bearing. All good, Pammy? Yeah. So I'm just changing the bearing over. So the 19mm bearing is going to reduce my depth of cut. Now the reason I reduce my depth of cut is, number one, to minimise tear out on the inside of the trench. Now remember, this is all revision. Minimise the amount of tear out on the bench, on the trench, so that when you look into the box, you can't see anything on the trench. It's just like nice, clean where the edges, where the base fits. Okay, so that does that. Now, as we said before, there's my ruler. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put feet in it as well. What I'm going to do is allow some material for that. So I'm going to set the top of the trench, or the top of the tooth, to 10mm. That's my go-to measurement. What that does, that allows me 6mm of play to do the feet on the bottom of the box. You'll notice on this, you can see on the bottom of there, just there, you can see the trench. There's only just a little shadow line. So that's all I want to create. That's why I have 6mm. Okay, so set at 10mm. I'm going to give you an overhead look at this one. Let's see if this works. So I'm going to rotate around the box. Okay. Shift some of this stuff out of the way. Now, my first cut is always with the rotation of the router bit. I wonder if I can bring that down a bit further. Is with the rotation of the router bit, which is called, well, some people call it climb routing, some people call it back cutting. It's got lots of different terms, but all I want to do is I want to scoop the material out as it works around the box. Okay, so that's what I want to do. So ears on. Somebody asked me a little while ago where the safe place for your hands are when you're cutting around that trench, outside the box, of course. You've got to remember that you're going to be cutting a 5mm trench, so the thickness of your material has to be more than 5mm. Otherwise, you're going to cut through all the way through your box. So if you're doing an insert tray, you want at least 7mm of thickness in the timber, so that you've got a couple of millimetres of material on the outside of the box. This one here, we've got 10mm material, and all I've done is cut 1mm depth of cut. So when you look at it, what you can see is this lovely clean trench. You can see that really nice and clean. It's only 1mm deep, and that's not adequate to support the base. So what I'm going to do is to change back to my original bearing. It's just a matter of taking the bearing off. A little sleeve that goes in that bearing. Decided to stay put. So now I can cut 5mm of depth. So, very important when you do this one, very important that you do the correct technique of using the router, and that is go against the rotation of the router bit in your final cut. We've already cleaned up the top edge. We've got that nice and clean. Now it's just a matter of doing the rest of it. So ears on. The important thing to remember with this is when you're rotating around, good Pammy, when you go rotating around, just make sure your fingers are well away from the cutter and they're outside the box, as far away from the cutter as you can get them. But you still need to have downward pressure, not real heavy downward pressure, but enough to be able to move the thing around. A lot of people who are a bit apprehensive about the box or about their router tend to have a death grip on everything. You don't really need a death grip. It's not, if you've got sharp router bits, it's going to cut nicely anyway. So there you have, you can see, look how clean that trench is. A lovely clean trench. Okay, now feet. So just take off the tape. We don't need the tape anymore. One of the things that I do before I actually pull the box apart is measure up for the base. So my base, and when you're measuring for the base, this is what we do. Remember, you need to allow things to move. So if you look at this one here, you can see that my measurement to the inside edge is 143. So the depth of my trench is 5 millimetres, so if I added 5 millimetres, I would go to 148. That is not going to allow any movement. So if I take a millimetre off it and bring it to 147, that would be my side measurement. Just write it on there, 147. And my length, exactly the same technique. I've got 236. So 236 and 4 is 240. So my piece of material, when I cut it, is going to be 240 long by 147 wide. And that will fit into there. So we then can disassemble. Before I do that, just mark 2 of my joints. When I put the box together, those 2 crosses will go together. Now, support. Just make sure you support it while you pull it apart, like so, like so, and like so. Got a fair bit of a mess here, but anyway, we'll get as much done as we can today. Now when I cut my feet, I'm using my TSR W12. Okay, so that's my biggest spiral bit. Down just above. There's no critical measurement for that, it's just above. Now I'm going to be working on this side of the fence, so I'm going to shift the camera for you so that you can see what's going on. So if I just move that across to here. Just want to see if that works. How's that? Might even bring it in closer. And my fence. By now, I would imagine quite a few of you would have made a desktop box or a little pencil box. Some of the things that I'm doing now you will recognise. Oh, I've got it upside down. Whoops. The wrong side out. This one. Takes forever to wind that up. Okay, when we come to doing this, I'm going to have to shift the camera again. Actually, I might turn the top one on and you might be able to see there. Let's have a look at that. Nope, you can't see it. Go back here. So what I've done here is there's my router bit. That's a 10mm router bit, 10mm diameter. There's my centre. If I bring the fence over to the centre, I've got 5mm of material exposed. Now 5mm will mean that I don't have very much support for the base. So if I give it a little tweak, remember I'm only working with 6mm. If I give that a little tweak, I didn't move that very far, and that's all I need to do. You can get really pedantic and start measuring things if you like, and that's fine. If that's what you feel that you need to do, that's good. I tend to find that a little guess every now and then won't hurt. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to set up a fence. So what's going to happen is I'm going to push my piece of timber along here, and I'm going to move from right to left. Okay, so what happens is the router bit was cut onto the piece of timber this way, right, and then we'll move along. But it comes off the piece of timber on its leading edge, which means you get tear out. We don't want to have tear out. So I need a ruler and a measurement. So when I measure, I put one measurement on. I stand the piece of timber up like so, lay it over on its back so that the trench is on the far side away from you. Guess your measurements. And have a little play with different measurements to see what sort of visual effect you get. On rectangular boxes, you should always make sure that you have a longer foot on the long pieces and a shorter foot on the short pieces. So all I've done is just two measurements. Not that one, this one. So there's my two measurements. That one there and that one there. That's all I need to do. Don't need to do any other measurements. You're going to end up with a datum point when you set your fence. So that'll give you your distances. So here's how we go about that. So we move our fence along, and what I've got is my measurement there is on the left-hand side. Really good being able to move this. It's on the left-hand side of my cutter. Okay, so if you have it on the right-hand side, you're going to end up starting your cut out here somewhere, right? But if you've got it on the left-hand side, you'll start your cut on your mark. Now, it's not critical that you actually start on the mark, because remember, it's only a foot and your box is a bespoke box. So the measurements will all be the same anyway once you start. So I've got that set up like so. Lock it in with my favourite Bessie clamp. Ears on. Now you see what happened there. I was too long in the corner for a start. You can see it, so I burnt it a little bit, but I can fix that. That's not a problem. You've also see that I have all this tear out happening here. If I went all the way along to the end, I would end up with that on that part of the foot. And that is not a good idea, not a good look. So, once you've cut the first one, rotate your timber over, just flip it over like so, and start again. So all I've done is I've gone just over halfway, rotate it over and start again. So you can see a nice little trench, and I've got lots of meat on it. I'll do the other end, the other side. My next one. For those of you who've missed that, hopefully in the first show, hopefully you can see the benefits of actually cutting nice little feet in there. Let's get this back to where it belongs. Shift all this stuff. Because the next thing I need to do now is cut myself a base and fit the base. And it doesn't look like we're going to get too much further than that today, but that's okay, because when we come back there's a whole new process in how to set up for putting lids on. Just shift this stuff here. So now you can see, I'll just put two of the pieces together. Where's my crosses? There we are. Like a jigsaw puzzle. So as you can see, when you put that together, I haven't got the base in it yet, of course, but the beautiful little feet in the bottom. You can see it's just a shadow line. That's all it is. You can see it better on there. So it's just a shadow line, and it just enhances the box. It lifts it up off the bench. It makes it stand up a little bit. And the other thing it does, it gives it 4 points of contact with the bench, so you don't get any rocking. Okay, so really good idea if you want to do something like that. What you can do is you can add the feet afterwards if you like. You can make the frame without these cutouts and make the frame make little feet to go on it, and that's one of the things that we're going to do way down the track when we start getting into the intricacies of fixing little bits and pieces of a box. We're actually going to add some feet to a box, so we're going to do that in one of our projects. So that's that. Now all I need to do is make the base. Okay, the base material. I already wrote on my piece of material 147 by 240. So we're going to do a little bit of cutting. A piece of material is 4 millimetres thick. It's a piece of rose mahogany. It matches up to the side pieces. My width is 147. Just go and dock that. So if you want to watch the docking. You can see that. Now the beauty of this saw is that I have a laser on it, and I can just set it straight on the laser. Now my piece is 240 long. can see that. And I'll dock that. Come back to here. Just shift this out of the way. So now I have my piece of material cut to size. I need to round over the corners. The corner in there is about the same diameter as a 10-cent piece. Now remember, a couple of weeks ago, one of the things that you can do is use a coin, a 10-cent piece, or a dime for those of you in the US. I think it's a dime. Is it a dime or a nickel? Not quite sure.
I think it's a dime.
A dime. Or what I have is one of our little squares, and all I've done is round it over the corner, which gives me the capacity to actually just use it as my square and do my drawing. That's if you don't have little gadgetry bits and pieces like I've built. Okay, so over here, I'm going to go for another walk. What I've done during the week, I did this as well. My first show, or one of the first shows, I had my little platform set up. And somebody asked me about it, and I looked at it and thought, oh, what a horrible little tool. Stuart from Colorado. Anyway, what a horrible little tool. So I decided to ramp it up a little bit. So I got myself a nicer piece of timber. I used the same platforms, which is cut at 90 degrees or bent at 90 degrees, and then I added a couple of shelf supports as my stops. And that whole thing just jazzed it up a little bit, and now it looks like a little bit more professional tool. I hope it looks better for you guys too. So this is how I use that. I think we're done for the day for that little piece of equipment. And as you can see, I have perfect corner, and when I put my little square on there, you can see it's exactly the same size. Okay, or the same as my 10-cent piece. So just fiddling around with it. The reason I did that was because I make a lot of boxes. And when I make lots of boxes, I've got to have at least some sort of time-saving device that helps me get through the boxes very quickly. Now, we pull the box apart. And fit our frame in. As you can see, fits fairly neatly. And there's a tiny little bit of movement in there. You can't see it, but I can feel it. So now I end up with my box with the base in. So my next step after this is to glue that framework together. Once I've glued that framework together, I'll then set it aside to dry. Now, unfortunately, we don't have enough time to go through the next couple of processes. So there's only 5 minutes to go. So what I want to do is just want to show you after we've glued it together how I go about sanding it. And I'll just put that aside. I'll glue that up during the holidays if I get time. So what I would have had was, you can see my joints protrude through, particularly on this one here. This is the bigger one I had before. So when I get that at that stage, there's two processes that I generally use. The first one is if I want to get the bottom of the box flat to start with before I go too much further. So I have if I remember rightly, I showed you a little while ago this U-boot sanding board. So what I do with it is cramp it to the bench. Now it's only on a piece of plywood, but my bench is really flat, so if I cramp it down, it's going to flatten it out. If you want to get really technical about it, it's always a good idea to have a glass platform or something, or a tile or something that's perfectly flat. This is adequate to do the bases, so it's just a matter of light sand, rotate round, give it another light sand, and keep rotating it round, basically because most of us are left or right dominant, so we're going to press either on our right hand side or our left hand side, and so what you want to do is keep it as even as possible. Now we're not taking a lot off, we're only taking off a little bit on all the feet. That's all we're doing, so just a small amount. So all we want to do is light sand, perfect. Next bit is the sides. If you want to do the sides, you don't have the equipment to actually do it on a linishing machine or something like that, it's just a matter of turn it over on its side like that, and you can work the sides off it. But you must rotate it around. Do that regularly. You can do that. Turn it around and rotate it, and you'll end up with lovely flat sides. You need to occasionally check for square. Okay, so just check to make sure that you got everything square and you're not taking too much off somewhere else, and you can work across your piece of timber like so, or your box like that. If you're using a linisher, this is where we go with the linisher. Bring this down to here. Can you see that? I better turn it on, eh? So there's my linisher. Don't actually go very far for a walk, do you? It's not like Dave Stanton's where you go for a little stroll up and down his workshop. Mine's not that big. Okay, so what we've done now is, just get rid of all of this out of the way. We've basically built ourselves a box, glued it together and sanded the edges. So that's where we're going to leave it today. And when we come back next year, I'm going to level out and parallel cut the ends, make sure that they're parallel to the front and back. And then we're going to cut some hinge marks, trenches to put hinges in. And I'm going to use a very simple task, a very simple technique for that. Not going to be elaborate or fancy. You don't need to have very, sharp chisels and the like. We're going to use a technique that I use. Not going to tell you what it is just yet, but we will get to it. But we have to make everything parallel before we start. Okay?
Mike wants to know what grit is on the linisher.
80 grit.
80,
80 grit, Mick.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to leave it there, and we'll be back on the 17th of January. So now, if you like the shows, please give us some thumbs up. If you've only just come onto the show, subscribe, and you'll get a message when we come back. So all that will be there. So seeing as how this is our last show, and Pammy, you want to wander up here with us? So what Pammy and I would like to do is, I'll get onto the big screen, is just wish you all a happy Christmas and a prosperous new year. And if you're out on the roads, please be safe. I know people need to go places, but I don't know if COVID's going to let you today. But please be safe on the roads, and we'll see you all next year. So have a Christmas for everybody, and please work safe, stay safe,
And come back next
and
year.
come back with us next year. Thank you.